what are things that we as men have to let go of? What are the stories that we've been taught by society, by the world, by the ingrained patriarchy?
I think a big one that stands out is needing to achieve to be worthy, needing to do anything to be worthy, XYZ, or just not being lovable. The conditioning that the when then idea, the when I get this, then I'll feel XYZ. When I get to VP, then I'm going to be happy. When I get the house, once I get the house, we get the 2 kids in the house, I just need some more space, upgrade a little bit. Once I do that, then I'm going to be okay. Okay, so we're in the house. Okay, but we need an investment house. Start getting some passive income. Once I get those, then we're going to feel okay.
The desire for more and more. It's like constantly desiring more, accumulating more, gathering more. Welcome to Everlutionary, a podcast about how we can heal and transform with the world. Every episode of my show, we explore conversations around philosophy, science, mysticism, social justice, how we can be change catalysts and activators and mobilize each other to create a world free of violence. I'm your host, Hawah Kasat. All right. Welcome to the Everlutionary podcast, Tim. Thanks for joining. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. Excited to drop in and chat.
Super excited to drop in. So we were chatting a little bit in pre-recording, and I want to just jump right into this. You made a pretty big life change recently. You decided to not drink alcohol anymore. Could you tell us a little bit about why you stopped drinking alcohol?
Yeah. So I just crossed a little over 2 years, August 15th. So we're about 28 months if we're counting by months now. 2020, I had just lost my job. And, COVID hit, and I was really I was trying to make my own business work. And I just, I was wearing a fitness tracker, I was wearing a Whoop. And what I started to see was the impact that alcohol had on my recovery. I was trying to be like a optimized entrepreneur, if you will, and be healthy and focused and cold showers and all that stuff. And I would be great during the week. And then I would, just go get drunk on a Saturday. And I started to notice trends where it would take me 3 days, 4, 5 days to get back to my baseline. And I was like,
that's
man,
the baseline from your biometrics in your watch that was telling you your heart rate variability and all that?
Yeah. So heart rate variability, which is our body's readiness to be able to handle stress, resting heart rate, things like respiratory rate, sleep quality, restorative sleep cycles, REM sleep, deep sleep. So all of the indicators that, hey, I'm recovering well, I'm priming myself mentally, physically, emotionally, I'm ready to just wake up and get after it. And that's what I wanted. That's how I envisioned myself to be a healthy dude, a healthy entrepreneur. And I quickly learned my behavior was not matching what I wanted. And so I just started seeing more and more how alcohol was not only affecting my biometrics, which is one thing, but it was affecting my motivation. It was creating more anxious thoughts as I'm stepping into this world of unknown of building a business. I noticed a couple days after drinking, I would have very negative thoughts like, what are you doing? Why do you think you can do this? Dude, this isn't going to work out, And so I just started cutting back. I didn't have a problem with it. I would drink 1 day a week for years and never drink during the week. But I was like, okay, let's skip a weekend. Let's just see what happens. Okay, let's drink half as much as we did before. Let's just see what happens. And next thing, I'd skip a week. I'd skip a month. I'd skip 2 months. And I would just be, oh my gosh, I felt like I hit a different gear. And I was so motivated, so much clarity. And then I'm like, dude, I am firing right now. Awesome. Let's go celebrate. I'll meet you at the park. I'll bring a 6-pack. And I would just, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And then the next 5 days, I'm like, man, why am I so negative right now? I was just flying the last few months. And now I'm like, I don't get it. And it's so obvious now, but it took me about 2 years to really connect the dots of cutting back that it was alcohol.
Cutting back and then starting a little bit again, and
Yeah.
then cutting back, and then realizing every time you reintroduce it, it sets you back again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
man. Wow. I love that. I'm coming on 5 years. I stopped really drinking in 2019. Also, no problems. Kind of like you. I mean, I was a CEO of a nonprofit in DC, raising money, going to galas, fundraising, drinking a glass of wine, a couple beers here and there. But it just started to, like, I'd wake up groggy. I'd wake up not optimized. My brain, I wouldn't remember things as well. I could tell my memory was not as good when I was drinking. And I was like, let me try this out. Let me try to not drink for like a few months. I was, went a few months in, and within like the first 4 months, because I had been drinking since I was like 16, 17 years old. Like it was just, part of like culture, life. And within the first 4 or 5 months, I felt better. I felt like I was 10 years younger. Like, really, I was like, wow, my body, like a lot of the aches and the pains were gone in my body. It was incredible. So I just never went back. I never went back.
That's so amazing, man. Everybody I talk to who has quit says life is like infinitely better. It's like colors are brighter, sounds are crisper. You talk about inflammation, just the motivation, like, it's like you don't just get rid of the day after hangover. There's actually like a chronic hangover that lays in the background that I had no idea was there until I got away from it. And that is the magic thing, I think, that people, when they taste that, once that goes away, and that's what I mean, you shift gears. That goes away and you go, wait a minute. Wait, I can live like this all the time? Then when you weigh having a drink versus that feeling, you're like, oh, that ain't worth it. I don't want that. I want to feel like this all the time.
Yeah, I think I'm in a part of like this culture shifting. We're gonna have a great conversation around masculinity during this show, but like I just love this idea of how some of the masculine gets tied up into like the way we associate joy and play with alcohol, and how alcohol is such a part of our culture, but it's really, really like poison to the body. And so for men that might be listening, like here's this kind of another way to think about our depression, our mental health, as we start having a conversation about masculinity. How can alcohol be a part of like creating more dissonance within our mental health?
Yeah. Questions I started to ask myself was, how would I need to feel about myself in order to never even want to drink? What version of me would have to be living right now to be like, dude, I don't want to drink. Do you know how I feel right now? I feel amazing. I don't want to drink. Like that's not going to do anything for me. And that really, started to shift. And I also had learned, like, I started using it, or it not even started. It was just a diversion. Just like when people reach for their phones while at a stoplight, or they're walking their dog or feeding their kid and they're just glued to their phone watching videos or sports or stocks or reading a blog. It's like all of these things are just diversions and distractions from, what's really going on underneath.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, I'm excited to get into this conversation here. Yeah, I mean, you've lived an incredible life. I feel like you've already lived a few lives in one, which makes a conversation really, really easy. I know right now you're in the midst of planning a walk across America, um, for bringing awareness to men's mental health and suicide prevention. We're going to be getting into that later in the podcast, but I really want to just kind of first start by seeing what you've been focused on lately, what you've been kind of how you've been moving through your days.
Yeah. Man, to be honest, a lot of where my energy and focus has been kind of even before training for this trip, planning the trip and training for this trip across America was honestly kind of figuring out what was next. And what was next for me personally, professionally. I had got out of tech sales in 2020. I started a clothing company manufacturing sustainable workout gear for men overseas, did that for about a year and a half. And then ultimately actually pivoted to start doing some men's work and start doing coaching and cohorts and groups and stuff. And it has gone amazing, and feel like I've found purpose, vision, mission, my why, however you want to call it. And like anything, we go through seasons of growth, of reaping the rewards, of maybe of breaking down or struggle and rebuilding. And it feels like the business really, took off and was growing really well, and was just working with some amazing clients last calendar year in 2023. And 2024 has kind of honestly been like, hey man, we're ready for the next level. We're ready to evolve, not get away from what I'm doing, but like, it's time to turn this thing up, another level, whether it's in-person retreats, changing the or altering the program, whatever. And so this year has been a lot of that, tilling the land, internally feeling a lot of just struggle and lack of clarity as I'm trying to figure out what's next. What is a step that makes sense? What is just the evolution that I feel like resonates with me. And I'll be honest, it's been incredibly hard. I think this has been my hardest year. Yeah, personally. Professionally, it's gone pretty well. It's been nothing crazy happened, but trying to figure out what the next version of Tim looks like, of the business, of the group, of everything. And, so I spent a lot of the year trying to figure that out, and was looking at things like, man, do I go to a meditation retreat? Do I go to India, for a while? I don't know. Anything was on the table. I was thinking about moving to Costa Rica for a couple of months. I need to get out of my business and shift it up. So this year and recently has really just been about, it feels like getting in the mud and trying to get to a place where I can gain some clarity on what's next.
Yeah. I mean, I find, and I think this is really, really important right now to me, it's this moment of knowing it's time to shake something up, right? And I'm curious, and I'm sure listeners are going to be curious. You had a very successful career. You were very successful in the world of business. You didn't have to change anything. You probably could have kept making a lot of money, steady flow of income. What was it that made you feel that it was time to try something different? And what gave you kind of the inspiration to set out on a new path, just, not even halfway through your life? You're what, like a third through your mid-career?
Yeah, I was at I don't want to say like the peak, but for me, it was my peak. And I had, I was mid-20s, late 20s. And, I had just got top rep in the world for my tech company. I got promoted to run a sales team and sales office in Manhattan, in New York City. I was making, good money. I had an awesome team. But as things on the surface were starting to fall into place, I started to feel less and less aligned internally. And so it was really challenging because I didn't know what to do, right? I didn't know how to quote unquote fix it. So I kept trying to do what I knew. I kept trying to do the same stuff. I was like, okay, well, maybe I got to earn a little bit more. Maybe the neighborhood I live in isn't good. I got to move neighborhoods. I got to move cities. I got to change jobs. You know what? My manager, I'm not getting the career trajectory and encouragement from my manager. That's what I need to do. Okay, I move. Okay, well, I was at a startup. Now I got to go to an established company. And then I was at the established company. I go, you know what, no, I got to go back to a startup. And so I made all these changes. I moved across the country 4 times in 4 years. I changed jobs 4 times in 4 years. I was just like seeking for answers in all the places I wasn't going to find them, in all the places outside of me, and to where I got to a point where, I keep trying the same things. Not only was it not improving me, but it was actually, causing me to decline.
What do you mean by that? Hold on, just back for 1 second. You said it wasn't lined up with internally, it wasn't in alignment with internally where you wanted to be. I want to pin on that for a second, and then also it not moving you in the direction. So like, what was internally out of sync for you with these various jobs that were lucrative and paying really good money?
Yeah. Well, I think in hindsight, it's become more clear in the while I was going through them, um, my mind was very fixated on bringing in more money and just working for a tech company that had, some status, some clout, if you will. That's kind of how narrow-minded my mind was to solving what I was feeling was off. But what I was feeling at the time was just the lack of meaning. I was feeling some isolation. I had gotten out of a long-term relationship and moved across country on 3 weeks' notice. And I didn't know anybody. I had no support system. And as somebody who didn't grow up with a high EQ, it took me a lot longer to develop that and realize what mental fitness and mental health even was, emotional regulation and self-connection and all that stuff now that I talk about. No idea then. And, as I was trying to solve, I was trying to solve for the wrong problem. I was looking in the wrong places. I was thinking that, okay, I must be feeling, isolated, lonely, unfulfilled, lacking meaning, feeling like I don't have purpose, not super fired up anymore. I used to wake up, get to the office early, and I loved it. I love working with the team, working on my craft, working with customers, all that stuff. And that just started to lose its flair. It just, the success and the growth just didn't have the meaning anymore. And so what I thought was, oh, it's just the company. It's just this. It's just this. And little did I know at the time, it took me a few years to really have to sit in that discomfort and pain to realize there was a deeper part of me that was saying like, hey, dude, it's time to shift up how you're living life, and the things that you're prioritizing and focusing on, or the things that you have been, are not the things that are going to help your soul evolve, are going to help you become the best version of you. They're not going to help you help others and find more meaning and fulfillment. So it was started to be this slow burn and this shift of almost tectonic plates within that's like, hey, something is clearly misaligned. And it just took a few years for it to, affect me enough on the surface and materially for me to start being like, okay, something's up. I got to hit pause, and I actually got to listen to what the heck is going on inside.
Right. Right. I love that. I love that. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, how this became such a pivotal next step in your life. I know that you hit this challenge of getting your day-to-day lined up with your heart and your purpose. And I think finding purpose is such a big part of finding joy and happiness in life. When we're doing things that don't fill our cup or that don't feel like they are inspiring us or in alignment with our values, then we're going to be spinning. Um, and there's a pseudo happiness. It's kind of the surface level happiness that many of us are often being we're kind of being lulled to sleep within this pseudo happiness. And you pivoted from this work and your career into being really interested in men's work, and specifically designing work specifically for men's mental health. Why did you become inspired by working specifically with men, and wanted to do men's work?
The thing so what ended up happening is my performance at work, my sales performance in my sales position got so bad that I got fired. I was lazy, not motivated. I was not the same guy, right? Because I didn't have the fire. I didn't have the clarity. And so, without that strong why, it just wasn't translating. And I heard this quote, you've heard it before, right? It's the idea that everything in life is neutral and only our mind creates meaning. And what that did is it pointed the compass where I was looking to change everything else around me: money, job, city, relationships, clothes, better haircut, whatever it was. And it pointed the compass back at me. And what it said, what that quote meant to me, I heard it just stopped me in my tracks. And I just thought, holy crap, it's me. I'm in all these situations, and I'm trying to make more money, or, blame my boss or the person who cut me off or all this. And it is me. It's my mind that is doing this. It's creating this discomfort. And I wasn't better overnight, but what it did is it got me to realize, it like shook me awake to be like, hey, this stuff is happening within. We got to figure out how to do anything about it. So I, started looking at mindset work. And I had also was pretty depressed. I had been on and off of depression and with anxiety for about 4 years. So at this point I was like, if I keep going down this path, I'm not even going to be able to keep a job, let alone, I don't know if I'm going to, if I'm going to live. How am I going to support myself? So I got to figure something out. And so I just started exploring, and I started reading about the mind, which ultimately led me to things like emotional intelligence and regulation and more spiritual type of work, which, we can get into later. But it really, I started learning about depression. What causes it? Where does it come from? What are all the influencing factors? And I started just chipping away at that, taking even better care of my health, starting to journal a little bit, trying meditation for the first time, ended up getting into some breath work. And so I started to just test and tinker of all these different things I was reading about. I was listening to podcasts all day. I mean, literally it became a full-time job. And as I started, to think about what was after tech sales, one of the things that came up is I always had this idea to start a clothing company. Growing up playing sports, it's hard to find stuff that fit me well, that was comfortable. And so I was like, I always wanted to make workout shorts. So the short story with that is I went all in on that. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I've not listened to my gut my whole life, really since I played baseball. I'm like, we're doing this. And whatever happens, happens, but I'm committing to this. And I got such a big spark back. I got so much motivation. So I had that on the professional side I was working towards. And then on the personal side, I was still working on me. And as I'm designing and making shorts, I'm thinking about creating a brand. And I go, you know what? I want this to be more than just shorts. I have seen such impact already about taking care of my well-being, mentally, emotionally, physically, things like nutrition, sleep, exercise. I knew that stuff, but now incorporating things like journaling, meditation, talking, therapy, all types of mental well-being type of stuff. And in that process, I was like, well, for my brand, this company, maybe I'll start sharing a little bit of this on LinkedIn. Maybe if I grow a following on LinkedIn, I'll be able to sell more shorts. And so I started sharing about how I had gone through depression and how I turned the corner with it in about 4 or 5 months doing this work on my own. And sharing that as a man on a platform like LinkedIn, talking about the impact things like alcohol and tech sales and toxic cultures had on me and just how it impacted me, not blaming those, but seeing how they impacted me. Got so many guys to raise their hand and reach out and be like, yo, dude, you just described like exactly what I'm going through. My boss is the same stuff. And that kept happening. And so after a year of posting that kind of content and having men reach out and being like, yo, I didn't know you were going through that. Like me too, or, I'm here for you if you ever need anything. And there was so much support, but it wasn't happening publicly or on the outside. It was happening behind closed doors, which was so interesting to me. So that's really where that was kind of the moment after a year of doing that. Stuff wasn't working out, a lot of challenges with the clothing in the middle of COVID and all that. So it was clear to me, I'm like, wait a minute, clothing's difficult, really low margins. You got to need a high volume. I'm like, I love this stuff. This is very much my passion. It's very clearly a need. A lot of guys have been raising their hands. What if we look to do some type of men's work, build some kind of program where I can just have guys come in, teach them a little bit of the path that I took to get better, and I don't know, see if it works. And so that was, more or less the path to stumbling into working with men.
You mentioned the toxic workplace and how the toxic culture in the workplace really impacted you. I'm seeing a thread. I see how men were all impacted deeply by what is expected of us in the workplace. And sometimes I wonder how that toxicity spills over into our mental health, as you're talking about. And we see it. I see it. I just came out of leading a men's retreat. And, I've been doing men's work as well for many years. And And men, we hold a lot of, we hold a lot in between the lines. There's a lot that we need to be in the world because of expectations that are put on us. And then there's a lot that we are trying to write new stories about how we can be in the world as emotionally regulated, sensitive, receptive humans that care and that are being led by kindness. And the clients you work with and the men you're working with, I'm curious if you're noticing any threads that um, that men are experiencing across the board, challenges that men are facing with the culture, with the ways that we're expected to be showing up in the world, which perhaps are unhealthy. And could you point to anything that can help us understand where are we falling short in giving men the container they need to be healthy individuals in the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I think now men are really being asked a lot to step into this new evolved version of the masculine, the provider and the protector. No longer is it kind of the narrow-minded that I saw in a lot of these toxic workplaces where it's like, just like we got to just make money at all costs, like bulldoze people. I don't really give a shit what happens. We just gotta, we gotta push through it. And with the guys I'm working with is I think that's something that they have worked to live up to. To a lot of the guys are really successful. They have great careers, they lead awesome teams, they own their own companies. The material success is not a problem. For them, they're just feeling like, man, this is so empty. Yeah, I can provide for my family and I love that and it's great and I don't want to give that up. But this just feels like such a small piece of the pie. And what I'm seeing a lot, specifically with the guys I work with, which of course is a small section of it because of the content I write, so they resonate, but, really seeking more fulfillment, more meaning, a bigger vision, a bigger mission for life, right? Not wanting to just coast through and spend all of their mental energy on work and neglect their loved ones, their partners and their kids, or even the people they care about at work, and spending, every free minute they have stressing about achieving. Right? It's really, really exhausting. It's guys are realizing, man, I'm having to wear these masks all the time, and it's really exhausting. And it leads to neglected and often fractured relationships, total lack of presence, sometimes physically or most of the time just emotionally with their kids and loved ones. I think their health takes a total backseat. Less hours sleeping, more caffeine, more drugs, or probably more just alcohol to cope, to try and give them some sort of reprieve from the angst and the frustration and the feeling of stuckness and the looming burnout that they feel. And I think one of the problems is not with the men I work with, the problem is not the desire and the want to, be a more evolved version that, want more for their life than just achieving, wanting more purpose, fulfillment, vision, the mission. I talk about having a North Star, something bigger than them. It's not for a lack of want. They want it. Men want this. Right? It is often for a lack of education around what the hell do I do to start cultivating that? Where do I go? Oftentimes guys will have just tried therapy before that I speak with. And it's like, look, this helped me with stuff, but it didn't quite get me what I'm looking for. And so just understanding, hey, therapy is great. It's an awesome tool. But how does it fit in, into your toolbox from what you're actually trying to cultivate in your life? And so really trying to help guys see a bigger picture to the work they're trying to do, who they're trying to step into, this best version of themselves, what it's going to take, the stuff they're going to have to leave behind, the limiting beliefs, the habits, the et cetera, the discipline it's going to take, the intentionality, and guiding them through that. And everybody's different, so there's no one playbook to do it. But that's those are just, again, those are some of the things I see most common with the guys that reach out to me specifically.
Right, right. And even in your own life, I mean, I'm curious because the limiting beliefs and what we have to let go of, um, what do you sense in your like, what are things that we as men have to let go of? What are the stories that we've been taught by society, by the world, um, by the ingrained patriarchy that we all, as men, privilege and reap great privilege from, whether we desire the privilege or not. We are constantly in in a receiving abundant phase of power and privilege in this society. What are some of the things that we as men have to shed to kind of unravel the burden? Because it is a heavy burden that we carry, and I guess some men enjoy it. Other men, such as yourself, were tired of it and were like, I don't want to carry this burden anymore. I want to rewrite the story.
I think a big one that stands out is needing to achieve to be worthy, needing to do anything to be worthy, XYZ, or just not being lovable. The conditioning that when then idea, the when I get this, then I'll feel XYZ. When I get to VP, then I'm going to be happy. When I get the house, once I get the house, we get the 2 kids in the house, I just need some more space, upgrade a little bit. Once I do that, then I'm going to be okay. Okay, so we're in the house. Okay, but we need an investment house. Start getting some passive income. Once I get those, then we're going to, feel okay.
The
And
desire for more and more. It's like
yeah,
constantly desiring more, accumulating more, gathering
it
more.
is. And that's a product of the human mind, of the ego. Of the egoic structure it's insatiable. And so it being a survival mechanism that we have, it's always on guard. It's always on the lookout. And its way of operating is just that. It's always so what more can we have? Okay, we don't have enough, so we need to get a little bit more. Okay, what's our neighbor doing? Okay, well, they're over there. They just got a sit-down lawnmower. Should I get a sit-down lawnmower? I don't know. They just put a pool in the backyard. Should I get a pool in the backyard? And so catching how the mind operates is such a big one. That's really the first step in starting to see the patterns of, oh, wait, there it goes again. There it is saying, hey, I got to do this stuff. Otherwise I'm not going to feel like I'm doing okay.
Right, right. And you just got me thinking about when you talk about the overachieving or just achieving for our worthiness, also this idea of outdoing. We're always trying to outdo our neighbor, outdo the colleague at work, outperform um our colleagues so we can get the raise, we can get the promotion. And inherently it creates a spirit of competitiveness that is not healthy. I think there's healthy competition. I really do. I think there's healthy competition and there's healthy cooperation. We've overly identified in our society with competition. We are competitive to the point where it fractures relationship, and it compromises our ability to have goodwill for other people, right? Like, we want to be good. I want to have goodwill. I want you to succeed, but your success might mean I don't get to succeed myself. And so now all of a sudden, even though, back to what you said, internally aligned, like my internal compass, my values is telling me I want everyone to be happy and to succeed. But then there's another voice in my head saying, oh, I better get mine now. I got to outdo this person because I got to get that, I got to get that promotion or got to get that raise. So it feels like a product. It feels like a product of culture, society, economics, politics. It's kind of all integrated and intertwined, right?
Yeah, it's that. And the key thing, though, at the center of it is it's feeding into what's already there, which is how the ego is structured. right? So the society and culture and everything is a product of those primal drives and the things like insecurity, scarcity mindset. We all feel like we're inadequate. So if you just see all these things in society, it really is just fueling that fire. The other thing that I see, and this is something that really resonates with me, something I still struggle with, I guess you could say, or still work with, is, we're really it's a very like individualistic culture in the US. We are definitely a culture where it's like, man, go out and get yours and like rise to the top. And, you talk about that competition, which I totally agree. I think there's very healthy competition. I'm so glad that we have that here. But also in the way it's done is I feel like it breeds a lot of lone wolf mentality. And there are parts of my life being a lone wolf, serves me, I believe truly now really well, and I love it. But it also, really hurt me in a lot of areas too, not reaching out for help, feeling like I got to be able to do this on my own. I can't I can't like call a buddy. I can't let my family know I'm struggling. They're going to think I don't have my shit together. As opposed to how I try and view it now is what I want most is to get back on track as quickly as possible. And realizing that the thing that gets in the way of that is just pride, is just my ego saying, no, we need to do it alone. I got to do this I can't call anybody. And it's like, dude, what do we really want? What do we at our core truly, truly, truly want? We just want to feel better. We want to get back. I want to be performing at a higher level. I want to be fired up, waking up. I want to be coming up with cool products and videos for my clients and having amazing conversations. That is the priority, not doing it on my own. So I can say, oh, I didn't have to call anybody for support.
I did it on my own. Yeah. And I love that you said that, because one thing that comes up often within the men's circles that I facilitate and hold is a common feeling that we don't have other brothers or other male friends to confide in, right? There's a sense that we are alone, and to unmask our emotions or to really share deeply from our heart the vulnerability, the fear that I'm feeling as a man, that might somehow compromise my manhood, And so we've associated manhood and this idea of being a man with this idea of having our shit together all the time, where we don't have the humility as men to just soften and say, you know what? I need some help right now. You know what? I don't have my shit all together right now. You know what? I don't really feel like running this race right now. I don't want to run the race. I want to just rest. And because we're not empowered as men to do that, and maybe that is because of the stories that we've been fed since we were children, that if you're a man, you act this way, you talk this way, this is what it looks like. Because we were holding so tightly to these stories, we're preventing the emergence of the new world that we really are desiring, the world we desire to live in. We want to birth this world, but we have to shed these old stories to do it, right? We have to shed those stories. So
yeah, so the stories, absolutely, and recognizing the stories, and also, I come back to I was never taught how to do this growing up. EQ is a skill, learning to not just I think the really fragile masculinity or the where a lot of men fall is like, we just see a small subset of feelings that on the human experience, the spectrum of feelings. And what we do unconsciously, of course, is we say, okay, only these feelings are okay to feel, and denying all the other ones. In that denial, our mind convinces us this is strong. Anything else, I'm not worthy as a man. In reality, it's weak. And that's the paradox, right? Because true strength, like you said, with vulnerability, where I thought forever, man, if I'm vulnerable, that means I don't have my shit together, I'm weak. But it took so much more strength from me to raise my hand and say something was up, to start sharing my story, than it ever did for me to bury that in a bottle every weekend, or to lean on things like drugs, or to just be like, no, I'm totally fine, and just like push down any sadness or anger or whatever I was feeling. And so definitely the work is building the skill of emotional intelligence, learning to be okay with yourself experiencing every emotion and not drawing a line and be like, no, I'm not going to feel that way, because it's uncomfortable or because I don't want to, or the story really is like, no, I'm not a man, if I feel sad or XYZ, whatever it is, everybody's is a little different. And starting to get and see that true strength lies in our ability to be present and emotionally stable with all of it. And to me, that's the hardest shit I've ever done, is learning that. That is harder than anything else I've ever done is learning on that. And it's a work in progress.
Yeah, we're all works in progress, and I love the space that creates for it. It creates permission, right? And it creates refuge for others who don't identify as men to be free and not feel like they need to become or adopt the behaviors of the unhealthy masculine, the unhealthy masculinity, which, I mean, I think about even like women in politics, for example, right? The political system was designed by men, right? And so for women to enter into politics, they have to become man-like and to move and have sort of like competitive behavior the way men do to even succeed or to move up the ladder, right? For women to be successful in business, in corporate America, they have to adopt man-like attributes in their personality, their drive for competition, things which are actually perhaps very counterintuitive for a lot of women, right? And women don't necessarily desire that, but they have to become that to succeed in the world. And I think the burden that I was mentioning earlier, I think part of that burden is somehow like reimagining these systems, these corporations, these the political wheels that we turn in, and imagining them as if they were being born or being birthed from this emotional intelligence, right? That you're speaking to. Like, what would it be like to have systems that were equally designed by men and women, where women's sort of natural flow and way that they move through the world was curating the way we moved in corporate America, right? I think the systems would be different. Um, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. It's the yin and the yang balance. It's the masculine, the feminine energy, and you can't over-index too far on either one. There's a balance that's required in everything, whether it's business or politics. And a lot of I feel like just hearing you share that, a big reason why women have to really lean into that masculine in something like politics is also because a lot of the men in that position are over-indexed on the masculine, and they don't have the EQ or the ability to really lean into the feminine as well. But both, it's not always a 50-50 split, but at any time both are involved. That's how of course, the yin yang works.
So how do you Tim, how do you feel, or how do you think that we can bring the emotional intelligence of the man, of the masculine? How do we raise the bar? What is the way that we work in our communities to begin to bring this important feeling to men?
What just popped right in my head when you shared that is storytelling. I think back to when I was really at, my lowest point, probably in 2018, and I didn't tell anybody I was struggling, 4 years without telling a single person that I was struggling, right? There was a time I went into a psychiatrist once. I went in with a hood, a hat, sunglasses on, and I told her, I spewed for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of just what was going on, what I was experiencing. It was a huge step for me. And her response out of her mouth was, right out of her mouth was, "We can write your prescription for that today." And I said, "Fuck that." I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but that was my response. And I got up.
You just did.
Yeah. I got up and I left. And, it was so frustrating to me because I didn't feel seen. In the moment, I didn't know what I felt. I was just frustrated. But now I'm like, I drove 40 minutes out of Chicago. I went to sing. It was like really an act of courage and strength looking back. And, she cared. She wasn't dismissive, but that's what it felt like. Cause I'm like, you're not even going to respond and ask a question or be like, "Oh, I'm like, that sucks." To go through it was like, "Let's get you on some pills." And so I bring that up because I always think back, hey, what could I have said to that guy, to me, that version of me? Like, what's something I can do, like in my content or writing or coaching programs that's going to help somebody? And the thing that I always come back to is, man, if I would have had a role model, if I would have had somebody, whether it's in my company or somebody I really look up to, that was able to talk about this stuff matter-of-factly, just openly, and just be like, "Look, this is what I struggle with. This is what I was going through. This is how it impacts me. This is what my thoughts are like. This is how, I'm affected emotionally. This is what happens to my body. I get tired or whatever. Sometimes I lash out," and started to help me understand the impact it had, the warning signs, what to do about it, how to start to regulate. Like if I had somebody I really looked up to that said, "This is just what I was going through," that I feel like really would have got me to pay attention. And so I just feel so strongly about stories, and having guys just in it, you don't have to be a writer, content creator, but it's like, let's create a space, a container, as they say in the industry. Let's create a safe container for conversation, just to be able to say, "You know what? This week for me has been shitty. And let's just start there." And allow guys to kind of dip their toe in the water, to experience what it's like to voice something or sit across from somebody who's saying that and hear them describe it and be able to be like, "Damn, I resonate so much with what he just said. Like I didn't even realize it, but I feel that exact same way." And so that to me, I think is what's missing, because we try and do everything alone. So if we're in a space with like-minded guys, in a community where we really can see eye to eye with the other guys, or we look up to them a little bit. And if we just create that space where we either hear someone sharing their story, like I try and do, it's having been further along than a lot of the guys I work with, just on the path, having been dealing with it for more years, I should say that. Or getting guys to start voicing it for the first time. I think that is just it really starts the healing process.
I love it. I mean, to me, it comes down to getting men together more often in terms of what I'm hearing from you, but also what I'm experiencing in my own work is the more often we can gather men together to hold each other and to realize that we're not alone and we don't have to do this alone, then we naturally, I think, have a desire to tap back into our emotional body. We've been cut off from our emotional body for so much of our lives. The movies, the superheroes, the Hollywood actors that are playing these roles of men, they create an image in our mind that is so unrealistic for what really needs to happen. And in that way, our mental health as men is really compromised. And when our mental health as men is compromised, it impacts everyone really deeply because of the position of power and privilege that we hold. When we come into our homes as men and we're depressed or we're sad or we're holding all this emotion and we've got no way to share it, we're bottling it up all inside. And then we come home and we've got no outlet for it. We don't have the words, we don't know how to communicate, then we just take it out on our families, on our children in ways that are really unhealthy. And so like, if we can just gather more often and create, as you said, a container, a space, a brave space, a really brave space, for us to realize that this is the work, and that I'm not alone. I love that. I think that's so important. You're doing a big event coming up. Um, it's it's a 2,800-mile walk across America, and you're doing a walk across America to raise awareness and funds for men's mental health. And can you tell us a little bit about this walk and what's going into the the organizing of it? When's it supposed to happen, and how do you hope the walk will raise awareness towards men's mental health?
Yeah, I'm eyeing March 6th as the departure date. Um, big reason for it. Really, I mean, selfishly, it is, very much. I mean, it's for me. I wouldn't be doing this if it really wasn't at its core for a chance for me to deepen my connection with myself, with the universe, with God, with all around me, whatever that ends up being and meaning to me along the journey. Um, and some like when I first heard this idea of walking across America, the instant I heard those words, I just felt like a lightning bolt went through my body, and I was like, "Holy crap, I gotta do that!" And not only that, it was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do that." And and then shortly after, I was like, "Well, this year was the first time I ever experienced suicidal thoughts, and it was really some low points, just with a lot of apathy. Also, something I had never really experienced before." And I'm so grateful for going through that because, I felt what it's like to have those thoughts and have those thoughts not just be fleeting, but feel very, very real day after day. And to where I start, thinking about different ways that I could do it easily, right? And hoping I just don't wake up in the morning. And and so thinking about the walk, I was like, oh my gosh, this is, of course, this is exactly what I want to do. And my whole mission going in is, to write or to make videos every day, but really commit to sharing the whole journey, not just from a logistical standpoint, hey, I'm walking through Kansas right now. That's cool. But more so about what I'm going through, the struggle, the highs, the lows, any insights, revelations, but also a chance to just be completely raw and real with, my journey before, what the walk means to me, some stuff that's coming up as it's coming up, and just allow it to be, something like we were talking about, a way to tell a story that gives other guys insight to, hey, talking about emotions and feelings and working on this shit isn't just for sitting in a cush chair, in therapy. It's like, how about I go out and do the hardest thing I've ever done in my life? I've trained jujitsu. Like, I trained with some pretty badass guys who have smashed my face. And it's like, this is just on a totally different level. And so how about combining those two and really, playing with that contrast to see what, comes up. And so planning, I was first going from Virginia Beach to end in San Diego, where I'm from. Turns out that leaving in March, that would put me right in Arizona, right in the desert in the middle of summer. So I've switched that. So I'm going to go west to east, and I think I'm going to do, talking with my dad, brought up the idea of Route 66. With it being a little bit more touristy, of course, pretty famous, there's going to be more stops along it, perhaps some walking paths next to the road, starting in Santa Monica or LA somewhere. And, starting in March, in terms of planning, one thing that I would love is to have a support vehicle with me the whole time. Somebody who can meet me 5-10 miles, replenish me some food, talk, go to the Airbnb or campsite or, wherever, and just someone to be there with me and supporting on any of that stuff. It's pretty hard as a almost 36 to be able to find a friend who can take 6 months. If somebody could work remote, they could make it work. But
Mm.
so I'm
You
planning
said it's
on,
going to take 6 months?
yeah, at about 150 miles a week, which is 6 days a week, 25 miles a day with one rest day. That's the loose math.
Wow.
It'll take about 5 months, 5 or 6 months. So 5 months if I'm sticking to that plan. Yeah.
To walk across America.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's beautiful
Yeah.
and profound. And then during the walk, will you be walking alone, or are you organizing other people to walk with you?
So how I'm planning now is to backpack it. I'm not saying others can't walk. That may change if when I'm on the road and given conditions, and it may be, more dangerous than I would like to invite, like, one of my friends out. But I've had almost 10 people now of like friends, close friends that want to come out and support and walk with me during a stretch. Um, and so I'm writing all those down. I'll share the plans with them as it comes up. And if it works out, amazing. I've had a lot of people reach out and be like, hey, if you're coming through this town, you can stay at my place, we'll make you food. Whatever. So getting a lot of love and support with that. In only 2 weeks have raised, over $3,000 from barely sharing it. So, trying to raise about 15,000 to help offset some costs of food and lodging and stuff. And then trying to raise on top of that 50,000 to donate to mental health, suicide prevention organizations and companies that are really, really focused on that. Trying to get one or two brands that maybe want to partner and sponsor and perhaps fund as well. So some cool moving parts in all new territory for me, quite literally.
Yeah, literally, you'll be walking through brand new territory. I have a funny story. I actually hitchhiked across the U.S.
No way.
back almost like 20 years ago. I hitchhiked from Berkeley, California, all the way to New Jersey, near New York City.
Wow.
Took me
Holy.
about a month. It took me about a month, maybe like 3 weeks. About 1,000 miles into the journey of hitchhiking, I realized really quickly that the truck drivers were my best way to get the most miles under my belt. And I didn't have to hitchhike. It was actually, for those that read my first book, it's called Trust Before Suspicion. And so I hitchhiked across the country in a way to just trust people before becoming suspicious of them. That was my whole motto. And I didn't like how our world was so fear-based. And I just figured, it was what, 2001. I just felt like there was more goodness in the world than we had really, I think, given look towards. So I just wanted to kind of bring out that goodness and see what it would be like. And I learned a lot on that hitchhiking trip and met some incredible people who, some people took me 100 miles, some people took me 30 miles. Some truck drivers took me across four states. And I was making the most time with truck drivers. And at one point I met a truck driver that was going all the way from like Spokane to, I think, Cleveland. And he offered me, he's like, you can just ride me to Cleveland. And I was like, no, that would be too easy. But it's like, I want to go, I want to like pick up more rides along the way and see kind of the United States, and really meet people. I wanted to meet people. I was so intrigued by just the people and the culture and so many people in small towns that I got to meet. So you are inspiring me because I'm thinking back to that time when I hitchhiked across America.
That's
And
so cool. That sounds amazing. I bet you
yeah,
met some awesome people.
incredible people, incredible people that really took care of me. And at a time when I was a baby, I was like 20, 21 years old. I was fresh out of college, just kind of like, let's go hitchhiking.
Wow. That's so amazing.
So I wish you best on your journey.
Yeah. Thank you.
And, I hope we can follow along. We'll place links in the show notes to help people find you and donate to your fundraising for men's mental health work and suicide prevention work. Thank you for doing that and for
Yeah.
raising awareness around these issues that are so vital and important. Anything we didn't get to that you wish we had a chance to, anything you'd like to share as we close out?
No, I'd say for anybody who is spiritually inclined, I recently went on a more of a spiritual pilgrimage to India for about 2 or 3 weeks, which is such an important stepping stone to coming back and feeling clarity with this walk of miracle. I didn't have the idea before I went, and it was just so profound and so amazing to be in a country with so much contrast to the States, but a place where people were so kind and welcoming, where materially it's so different. There's trash on the road, there's pollution, there's a lot of poverty. But to be in a space where faith and spirituality is number one. It's the number one thing, devotion there. I was telling my buddy, I'm like, here, people have bumper stickers and flags out their house of their favorite sports team. I'm like, in India, they got Hanuman, they got Krishna, they got their favorite gods or goddesses or deities. And it's like, and that's it. And it's everywhere. And it's just, all consuming in a way. You just feel so just held by it. And that I think you can understand, but being there, you can't escape it. And so being there for a few weeks was just really, it was really, really powerful. And it's a type of trip I can tell it was definitely stimulation overload. Being there, but coming back, having some time to digest and reflect. Just a really, really, really powerful trip. It was mostly visiting different holy sites and cities and temples and dipping in the Ganges, and you're going to fire ceremonies and all this stuff that was definitely stretching my comfort zone. But it was amazing just to be there physically in the presence of that stuff. It was just really powerful, really impactful.
Yeah. Did you see anything while you were in India that challenged the Western idea of what it means to be a man? Did you notice any masculinity behaviors that were very different than the way you see masculinity show up in the West?
I don't. No, nothing really comes to mind right now. I don't know if I've viewed the trip through that lens quite yet, in a way. I just think the hospitality and the kindness and the devotion to God or whatever their belief system was just so apparent. It was woven into everything, every experience we had. And, it felt like there was a deeper level of care, like we were being taken care of in places we went. So that I feel like definitely stood out. And I know that more men, can bring that into their life, me included.
Totally. No, I love that, man. I mean, Hanuman is basically their favorite sports team, and
Yeah.
their gods are literally the flags.
Yeah.
They're bumper stickers. That's the truth. When I was a kid, I'd spent a lot of time in India, growing up through a lot of summers in my life. And one thing that always struck me was, all of like boys and men would often hold hands and still do today.
Mm. Yeah,
And
I did see
hol-
that.
holding hands as completely like not in a way that symbolizes them being queer, but more like we just hold hands as a way of affection. And so I remember at first being really uncomfortable when I was young because I would go there. I was born here in the West. I was born in New Jersey, like outside New York City. But I would be there and my cousin would, like my cousin brother, like my first cousin, he would like hold my hand while we walked down the street. And at first it would like make me uncomfortable because like, what's going on? And then I just kind of started noticing that everybody was holding hands a lot. Like all the men would just hold hands while walking down the street. And there was no taboo. It was not like, it didn't mean that you were gay or queer. It just was like, that was just the way that we showed affection to each other, which still to this day, I always remember like how profound that was as an experience in my life to see that, but also to be a part of it, you know? And then also men wear lungis, like men in India, they're called lungis, but they're long skirts. And they're wearing skirts everywhere. And it's normal, it's natural. That's just kind of like you got one piece of cloth, you wrap it around your waist.
That's what I think one of the things that stood out. I'm glad you brought up the point of holding hands because I remember seeing that a few times. And the first time I saw it, it hit me. I think normally, if I would have seen it here, I would assume, the guys are gay or queer. And there, it just, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, those are two brothers. It was just like so obvious how I saw it, how they were walking. And, I was like, man, that's so interesting, and amazing and so different. And I think that was one of the things I loved about India is the contrast. Contrast in so many different areas, not just the material, the food and the traffic and, the cows in the middle of the road and sidewalks, but, just how things work. Like here, it feels like things like got to fit into a box and be more structured. And there it was like, yeah, we'll make it work with whatever. We're kind of open to any ideas or any solutions. And what one of my takeaways was seeing how the country works. It works amazingly fine, and people are happy and they have their problems. We have our problems. Okay, so what? Let's move on. But it's like the fact that they can live life so completely differently than we live in the West and get along just fine. It just says is like, yeah, there's no one way to live. There's no rule set. You can do it however the heck you want to. And that was something that really, really stood out to me early on, where I was like, oh man, this is so different and I love it.
It's like another planet.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's like,
yeah,
it's a whole nother planet out there. India is not even, you can't, it's hard to compare the East and the West in those ways.
Yeah. It is intense,
Tim,
but it was great.
Tim, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad you brought that up and called that in. I love the work you're doing. I appreciate this really important conversation around healthy masculinity and how we can show up as men in the world. We can definitely, and we will point people to your walk, and that'll all be in the show notes so people can find you and support you, donate to the walk and help you raise money for men's mental health and also suicide prevention. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's really, really incredible. Would love to stay in touch with you as you start walking, and share your journey with our listeners across the world.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for having me on. It was a great convo, and absolutely, yeah, stay in touch, 100%.
Right on. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Everlutionary, transforming and healing the world, is brought to you by me, Hawah Kasat. If you would like to find out more about my story, head to hawahkasat.com and visit social media, where I'm active on Instagram, Substack, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook. Be sure to share this podcast with a friend, and to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thank you for listening. Stay in touch. Peace.